Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. I'm Trent Christensen, and this is KMMU. KMMU and Main Street Media stream live wherever you enjoy your streaming. We broadcast live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and on our website, kmmu.org. Now please join our host, John Twitchell. This is Let's Talk Utah's Talk with John.
In the news, former President Joe Biden has publicly disclosed that he is undergoing treatment for an aggressive form of prostate cancer that has metastasized to his bones. Despite the seriousness of the diagnosis, Biden has expressed optimism about his prognosis, noting that the cancer is hormone sensitive and has not affected his organs, which makes it more manageable. The announcement of his diagnosis on May 18th has prompted discussions about the timing, especially given the ongoing political discourse over Biden's past decision to seek re-election in 2024. Some have speculated about whether the diagnosis was known earlier. From the FBI, Director Kash Patel has confirmed a formal criminal investigation into New York Attorney General Letitia James, focusing on allegations of mortgage fraud related to a couple of real estate transactions. The basis of the probe centers on two separate properties. One about property in Virginia, where James is accused of falsely claiming a Norfolk home as her primary residence on a 2023 mortgage application to secure more favorable loan terms. This claim conflicts with her active role and residence in New York. The other is about a Brooklyn property, where she misrepresented the number of units in a property she has owned since 2001. Possibly to qualify for loans intended for smaller properties. Seems these accusations and allegations are similar to the charges she brought against President Trump. It's a bit ironic. Also from the FBI, Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino have recently addressed several high-profile investigations, including the Jeffrey Epstein case, money laundering activities, and fraud involving elected officials. While specific details are limited, Patel and Bongino have indicated that the FBI is actively pursuing investigation into financial crimes, including money laundering and fraud involving elected officials. These efforts are part of a broader initiative to address corruption and restore public trust in governmental institutions. According to Patel and Bongino, there's a lot more to come. Some of the investigations may include what are being called activist judges. Salvadorian President Bukele has commented on the American judges. His statement was, "We had the same problem here, so we impeached them all and started over." What are your thoughts, John?
Hello, folks. This is Talk with John, and we will be getting to my thoughts on those subjects soon enough, but we've got a guest joining us, and that's what the audience is here for, really, is the guest. Looking forward to being with you for the next 2 hours, folks. This is Talk with John, and I will be introducing my guest momentarily, but first, let's make sure that my screen is properly adjusted. And then secondly, let's go ahead and start off with the show prayer and the show mantra. Now, the show prayer is just a prayer of my heart. And when it comes to doing this show, it's what's in my soul when I want to do this show. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra. Where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, folks, let's get to it. Let's bring in my guest, Michael Letts. Michael Letts of Invest USA. Michael is the CEO, president, and founder of Invest USA. Invest USA is responsible for handing out thousands of bulletproof vests to first responders, and he is a big fan of our brothers and sisters in blue, hence Invest USA and what he is doing and getting those active shooter vests out to our brothers and sisters in blue. So, Michael Letts, thank you for joining us, brother. It's been a month, and it's been like you said, it's just too long from the in between the time we talked.
It's been a little while, John. A lot's going on. I'll tell you this. I've been telling on the shows across the country, it's going to be a very hot summer, not just temperature wise, but it's heating up. It's already scorching now, and it's going to get a whole lot worse in the days ahead. So buckle up. Make sure you got plenty of iced tea and lemonade because you're in for a ride.
Well, I am going to hold off. Unfortunately, Dwayne's going to miss it unless he comes back and listens to the show. I'm going to hold off on your thoughts on Cash Patel and Dan Bongino and the different thoughts there with the subjects that I talked to you about. But let's get into a few. President Biden, cancer diagnosis. What does that mean? And what's the significance other than just some old man has cancer?
Well, it's got a great bit of significance, and let's talk about it. Let's frame the history and what has occurred to this point and why it is occurring. First of all, let's lay the groundwork. Every president is required to have an annual physical, which is made public to the American people so that they can have confidence in the ability of their leader to perform the duties necessary for the office. Why is this occurring? Well, if you remember during World War II, not that we have anybody listening that goes back that far, but during World War II, at the end of World War II, you had FDR who had a lot of issues health-wise with his heart and other things, and had grown so weak and was struggling so much that it's often said in historical books that how World War II ended, not so much our victory, but how we laid out the globe afterwards. It was divided up among the Allied powers, et cetera, played a great significant role in his health as to what he demanded out of the Soviet Union at the time, et cetera, et cetera. So it was determined then that Americans needed to know what was the health of their commander in chief. We've done that ever since. And quite frankly, here's where this is important. So it would go to show you that Joe Biden had a physical every year when he was in office. That physical entails two things. It entails your mental cognizance as well as your physical. Now, two things are occurring in this particular incident that we're fixing to talk about. So you had your doctor every year tell us that you're sharp as a tack. I don't think anybody in America believes that today. So either you weren't a very good physician or you were deliberately misleading the American people. And that's a felony. Second of all, when you're talking about the physical condition, so you're telling me that he had no earlier indications of prostate cancer. Suddenly, right after he leaves office, it metastasized into a 9 level, of course, 10 being the worst. So that's very interesting from a medical standpoint. How are there no symptoms and it was not picked up on in years prior? How did it suddenly go to a 9 in just a matter of a month to 2 after he left office? Those are questions the American people want answers to. Now, why is this relevant and why is it coming up now? You know, the Democratic Party is tied in with the legacy of his last administration, and that is Joe Biden. And what is that legacy that Joe Biden is doing?
I'd also say the Democrat mainstream media is tied in with that legacy as well.
No question. The whole apparatus is tied in with that legacy. So what is that legacy that we're looking at? Well, let's just hit a few real quick topics. We won't get into detail on any of them, but you've got an administration that's now being accused of mental incompetency, of an auto pen making the decisions, the president not even knowing what decisions were being made. Out of the decisions that we have, executive orders, et cetera, the constitutionality, or many of those decisions are being questioned. In fact, the basic course and the baseline of are they treasonous is even being discussed. Needless to say, there is nothing positive that is coming out of the Biden legacy. So bear in mind, this is the legacy that they will have to run on 2 years in midterms, 4 years in presidential elections and for generations to come. So we have to do everything they can from their perspective to soften that legacy, change the narrative of that legacy, or do something to cause people not to view the Democratic legacy as being negative. It's kind of hard to argue with facts, John. So don't know that you can say that their decisions for open borders, auto pen, we could go here for the next 6 hours as to what his administration did, that any of it was of benefit to the American people. The bottom line, everybody's beginning to realize the legacy of the Biden administration was Americans last, everybody else first. Nobody likes that. So how do we then navigate through this potential pitfall for the Democratic Party in the years to come? Well, isn't it convenient that suddenly we have a life-threatening illness that has become beholden to the president, former president Joe Biden? And notice their narrative, John. Here's what you have to pick up on. Out of respect to the office of the presidency, out of respect to the service given by this president, Joe Biden, nothing further negative need be discussed. No further investigations need be had. He should be given the dignity of passage with the accolades of his willingness to serve for 50 years in public office. Now, that's a beautiful rhetoric, but quite frankly, it doesn't cut the merit. Because quite frankly, we have been saying in this administration, the Trump administration, that no one is above the law. Everyone should be held accountable for their actions.
He said that. He said that multiple times.
He did.
No one's above
I
the
was
law.
trying to be nice, John. I was trying to be nice.
And I'm going to, well, I'll let you be nice, but I'm also going to say he did that with 2 Marines on each side of him and a red backdrop say no one's above the law.
You're exactly right. And so what are they attempting to do? They are attempting to gain the compassionate side of America. Let's drop the investigations. Let's drop any further discussion of the fallities of Joe Biden, and let's just move on to the future. Unfortunately, we can't do that. And why? Because we're being mean? Absolutely not. When you violate the law and you cause repercussions to Americans, you have to be held accountable. I don't care. I mean, I feel bad for you. I regret that you're ill. Of course, the question still raised, just really how ill are you, dear? I'm not saying he doesn't have something wrong with his prostate. Is it a level 9? I'm expected to buy that from a doctor who has lied already for the last 4 years to the American people about his mental competency? Don't think so, John. But irrespective, I feel sympathy for anyone who is struggling with a debilitating condition. But just because you have an illness does not resolve you of being held accountable for your actions. That is what they're attempting to do. And quite frankly, John, it's not going to work.
Well, let's not forget that, just 4 years before that, he was the vice president, right?
That's a whole other legacy.
And he was getting those checkups then too. And
yes.
have, that so there is when you ask ChatGPT and such, a lot of that information kicks out. People can have that type of cancer for 10 years. Over 10 years. And
easily.
So that would mean that there's a very good chance that this should have been tested for and found at least when he was running for office, if not clear back when he was the vice president.
Well, let's be very clear, be very blunt on your show, okay? Unfortunately, as men, nobody likes the prostate exam, but quite frankly, especially as you get older, they don't really make it optional. So you cannot tell me that it was overlooked, not performed, or misdiagnosed. That doesn't make any sense. So the only thing that makes sense is this being used as a tool or a ploy, whatever word you want to use, to further their narrative. And what is the narrative they're trying to do? We've got to stymie the negative of the legacy that's being left, because it's going to hurt us all. Talk about it to Democrats. It will hurt us all in upcoming elections and for generations to come. We can't just say, hey, can y'all just forget about it? We don't want to talk about it anymore. That doesn't work. So they are attempting to play on America's sympathies and compassion. And quite frankly, I think it's going to backfire. I think it already has backfired. I don't think the Americans are buying it.
Okay. So what so there's conversation saying if this information was true. So this leads also into his cognitive decline.
Correct.
And why was this information not shared? For me, it makes the fact that how well his cognitive decline was known, this reveal of cancer, to me, tries to take the air out of the balloon, but it reinforces the level of how much information was withheld from the American public and how much the American public was lied to and how much was let's bring up the auto pen. That's the biggest issue.
No
How
question.
many of the decisions, quote unquote, made by the president of the United States, how many of those are legitimate, were legitimately signed? Who signed them? Who gave authorization to be signed? And who was above the person that was who did the signing? Meaning, it could be an underling that said, yeah, just go ahead and press auto sign, and it was people above him. It could have been Jill Biden. Who was it? Was it Jill Biden? Was it Ron Klain?
Well, you raised a very interesting point.
Could it have been a former president?
No question. And so we'll talk about all that. But before we get into that real quick, let's finalize what we're talking about on the physical itself. Here's what makes it a little unique situation. If this were you or me, and it is our private physician, that's all you have to do is look people in the eye and say, forget you. This is a patient-doctor confidentiality in a discussion. And you would have nothing else you could say. But in this particular instance, this wasn't his quote-unquote private physician. This was an appointed position as the White House doctor. Now, this takes on a whole different role. This is a paid position to which you are obligated by law to make sure you comply with the objectives of the office of which you have been appointed. And the purpose behind that office is for one purpose and one purpose alone. And that is to make sure that the health of the president is maintained and secure at all times, as he is the most powerful person in the world at the moment. And the second provision of your appointment is to comply with the law, which is to make sure an annual physical checkup is performed and the results are made public, not hidden, not twisted or slanted, but that the truth is made public to the American people. Here is the status of our commander in chief. Now, obviously, that didn't occur, John. So you see what I'm saying? There are some very serious legal implications to what we are discussing here right now.
So there's people who could be facing treason.
Yes, this is I just want the listeners to understand this is not an issue. Well, it's a private matter between my doctor. Forget y'all, we're moving on to the next thing. No. This is in a whole separate special category. And quite frankly, there are very severe consequences for betraying the oath of your office. And the White House physician is an office appointed by the president. Not necessarily, it can be his personal physician, that's fine, but that makes no difference. Once you are sworn into that position, you fall under the purview of the requirements of that position and under the federal law. And obviously, doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. Somebody didn't do their duty.
Yeah. All right. So,
which then leads us to the next point, John, that you brought about. What about the auto pen? Well, before we get into that, let's talk about what are the requirements of the auto pen. It has been utilized. In fact, Trump has utilized it before. But there are set guidelines and procedures that are required during its usage. What are those guidelines and procedures? Well, first of all, the president has to be present during its usage. Second of all, the president has to be cognizant and in agreement with the usage and what is being signed. Now, why? because, quite frankly, they want to make sure that it is the president of the United States running the country, not a staffer. Well, then why have it to begin with? We shouldn't even have an auto sign. Well, don't speak too quickly, and let me tell you why. Let me see you go sign 2,000 thank you notes or 2,000, appreciate your support or whatever it is a day and see how your hand feels. So there is a role for an auto pen. But what the role is to say, as the president, okay, let me see what's on the list. Yep, I agree that that's what we should do with it. Run them through the auto pen, and while I'm sitting here doing other things, signing executive orders, etc. You don't use the auto pen to sign executive orders, to sign pardons, to sign commutations, to sign legislation, matters of national security. That is not its purpose. What was the auto pen used for in this administration? All of the above.
All those exact.
So now let's begin to talk about, well, let's categorize them. Who did what then? Who had access? Who was using the auto pen? Well, let's take it from the top. Matters of national security and matters of foreign policy. It appears that we have very strong indications that, as you indicated, former presidents, plural, Clinton, Obama, and others, had direct roles in that auto pen being used on Joe Biden's behalf. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. What's the second category? National policy, legislative policy. Shockingly enough, it appears that Senator Warren, Pocahontas, the Indian in the U.S. Senate, had access to determining how the auto pen was used in those fronts. Well, let's talk about the third aspect, executive orders. Are we going to have a climate control program? Are we going to authorize 90, and these are facts, what I'm telling you, are we going to push $92 billion out to NGOs after we have been defeated in the election to make sure it gets spread around and our agenda continues even though we've lost the election? How are those decisions made? Those decisions would have been done by either chiefs of staff or deputy chiefs of staff for those kind of policies who all had access to it. And you have another category, pardons and commutations. Boy, that one really gets interesting. We're still figuring out how many people had access to that. And here's what we're discovering. It appears, John, that those went to the highest bidder. How much you got in your wallet today, John? You want to go on a pardon? Tell me what you got. Let me think about it. See whether I want to go ahead and run it through the auto sign and see if I can get you one and get it back to you this afternoon. You talking about some serious violation and felonies there. I don't think anybody in America listening to our voice right now has a difficulty in understanding the seriousness of the crimes that we're looking at that have been committed.
Okay, so let's say that so we believe also that legislation was signed into law by that auto pen. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
What happens to that legislation?
Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the entire broadity and what we're asking our listeners to weigh in on, okay? You have Supreme Court nominations that were made that we're investigating very closely now that could have been done with the auto pen. Here is the position that's being taken. Since you didn't meet the requirements, since you weren't present, you obviously, based on your cognitive ability, you're not even sure. It came out, here's what's so sad on a side note, John. It came out from his Secret Service detail yesterday, his former Secret Service detail. He got lost in the closet in his bedroom. I'm not quite sure how you do that.
Now, I heard that story and I was like, really?
And this is from secure sources. This is not that's made up. No. This is from his agents that were assigned to his detail. He gets lost in the closet trying to figure out where his clothes are at or where his shoes are at or where his socks are at. Now, that's pretty sad, John. So you're going to tell me that you are cognizant of who you nominated to the Supreme Court? You're going to tell me you are cognizant of trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars that you're sending to your friends all across in the House and the Senate, that you're sending to Ukraine, that writing kickbacks that are coming back, a major portion of it's coming back to the people who signed off on that legislation? I mean, we're just starting to have this conversation, John. You and I literally could be talking about this for the next 48 hours and still not get through everything that is coming up and becoming relevant. So the question now becomes for you, for me, for America, what do we do? You say, well, then that Supreme Court nominee needs to be removed from the Supreme Court. Okay. So if we're going to start that pattern, I'm not saying we shouldn't. If we're going to start that, does that mean every action that was taken as executive order is rescinded? Does that mean every dollar that was spent was done illegally? And what are you going to do about it? It was already spent. Tell me how we navigate out of this, America, and let's put our heads together and find a collective solution.
Guillotine comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I think that's a great consequence, but you didn't tell me how we're navigating the decisions that were made improperly or illegally.
Actually, this is where the Muslims maybe have it right. Let's hold someone's arm down and let them watch the sword come down and chop off their hand.
You know, I mean, everything is open for discussion right now. You see why I'm laughing about that? It really does have a very serious notation, because if we let's just take a very firm position. Everything that you cannot prove that he was cognizantly aware of and that he signed or was present when the auto pen was used is null and void. Okay, not just the pardons, not just the commutations, every action, executive order, appointments, etc. Wow, what do you do?
But on the flip side of the coin, Michael, if we just let it go and say, well, everything that was done supposedly with his auto pen, nobody cares, no big deal. What does that mean going in the future? You can stuff a president.
I agree with you.
You can stuff a president.
Here's something. Yeah, here's something to consider in the middle. All right, so we condemn all the actions, but instead of nullifying them, we hold the person that made the actions. I'm talking about not just the president. I'm talking about people that use it unauthorized. We hold them accountable in a very strong and firm way.
Okay,
is that for consideration? I don't know.
So I have to make this statement. This is from the producer and management. The opinions expressed are of the host and do not reflect the opinions of KMMU. He says no chopping of off of hands. Well, okay. Hopefully everybody saw that I had a big smile on my face. But I'm not necessarily saying there's got to be some huge penalty for doing it, because the bottom line is we just stick some crackerjack Yahoo in the office, or we get someone great in the office. We just fill him up with something that makes him lose his mind. We now can do whatever we want, long as we can will him out weekend at Bernie's every once in a while. Oh, see, he's standing. All right, okay, let's go shove him in the closet. And that's the other problem that's happened with Joe Biden. If we don't show, hey, yes, he was absolutely out of his mind, and there were people that were telling us that he was completely coherent, the bottom line is it gets really dangerous. What happen? Because I would rather have an evil actor in the office than not having someone that has no cognitive ability. So,
well, you had two things that occur, and let's just talk about them real quickly, just to give a little history lesson to our listeners. During the presidency of Bill Clinton, he was so distraught and put it this way, couldn't concentrate, couldn't determine what needed to be done. He lost the nuclear codes. This is not hearsay. This is documented. So for 48 hours, we could not have responded to a nuclear attack if we wanted to. They had to, and the amount of effort, and that's a very loose term, that it took to have to fix that situation is mind-boggling. All the codes on all the ships, submarines, installations around the world, they had to be changed, and new codes issued, and new access issued for Bill Clinton. So, we already know what it's like to have the risk of the nuclear codes not being safeguarded and not being properly utilized by a person who is focused on the job. And remember, we're not saying that Bill Clinton was mentally incompetent. We're just saying that during this particular time, he was so distraught, he lost. He couldn't, and to this date, they don't know where they were, how they got lost. Somebody picked them up. Somebody had access to the nuclear codes for at least 48 hours. while we were discovered that they were missing and had them all replaced. Or you could have Joe Biden, who doesn't make any difference that he has nuclear codes. He's not capable of understanding what they are.
All right, let's get on to some other stuff because we are. I think we covered something that's important that has depth, but let's get going to some other subjects and let's knock these. See if we can knock these out a little bit more quickly. 2 judges dismissed charges against over 100 illegal immigrants crossing in to America and trespassing on military installation. What's the problem with? Hey, they just walked into the United States. What's the problem with that?
But let's make sure our listeners understand what the significance of this is. I'll give you a quick overview. Teddy Roosevelt, when we acquired the rest of the land to make America what it is, talking about the West, reserved a buffer zone from Texas, from the Gulf of America now is what we call it, the Gulf of America all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That buffer zone was roughly 100, 150 feet.
I say we name that the
in the
Ocean
entire
of
2000.
America. I say we do that.
I agree with you. But here's what happened. We've had that property in our reserve for over 100 years. So President Trump decided, it's federal property, the buffer zone. And because it's federal property, I'm going to go ahead and designate it as a military installation. So we have a military installation that's 2,000, 2,500 miles long and about 100 to 200 feet deep. Now, he has the exclusive right to do this. He is the commander in chief. You can't say, well, Congress has to approve or the courts have to approve. No, he has the exclusive right to do that. So he designated that. Now, what did that do? Why did he do it? What's the significance? Because now if you cross and set foot on that buffer zone, you're not just entering into the United States illegally. You're setting foot on a military installation, which now puts you on a military jurisdiction, which means it's a whole different ball game now that you have violated military law by trespassing on a military installation. So what is it that you just mentioned? Is you see we're back to these activist judges. Well, we're not going to recognize that the president can make that a military installation. So you got charged by the military for having trespass on a military installation. We don't recognize the president's ability to do that. We're throwing all these charges out. Who gives them the right to violate the Constitution when the Constitution makes our military operations solely under the authority of the commander in chief? And when he made that designation, you may not like it, that's fine. But it still gives him the right to do so. But it's back to this issue, John, that we've been talking about for so long on your shows. It is activist judges. It's a judiciary that is determined to have a president or commander in chief in name only, and they will run the show. And then you have the foreign policy, the military, everything else, and they're unelected. They do whatever they want to do. Well, we're not going to tolerate and stand for that, and that's why we've got to go after the judiciary now, and you need to get themselves in line under constitutional authority, or we're going to have to make some serious changes.
Well, let's talk right here. What's the solution to that? Well, I want to mention the Salvadorian president said, "Hey, we had very similar problems down here, and we impeached them all." What are your thoughts on
Brazil? Brazil was he was brilliant on that. Let's quickly give
Wait a minute, did I
get
say
history
the
lesson.
Brazilian president, or did I say
No. It's El Salvador president. His name is Brazil, I believe it is his name, the president of El Salvador.
I believe it's Bukele.
Bukele, that's correct. And quite frankly, given a little history lesson, El Salvador was the most violent, most corrupt country probably in the world, or one of the most corrupt. People got opened up their doors late in the morning. You didn't want to open up early. They went out for lunch very quickly, grabbed whatever they needed, and came back by mid-afternoon and locked their doors to stay in for the rest of the time. The only way they could keep their lives alive. When he was elected, he decided to do a total reform. And the first thing he found out was the judges weren't going to let him do it. So he impeached them all. And they started over. And now El Salvador is one of the safest countries in the world. This economy is thriving. It is miraculous how he has turned that country around. Trump is doing the same thing. The difference is he's running into activist judges that we haven't impeached yet. And quite frankly, is really becoming a thorn in the side to try to get things done to make this country great once again.
I'm just trying to think which ones we want to cover first, because I do want to. So
There's a lot.
Let's do this. Let me take a break for just a moment and mention, folks, you are watching and listening to KMMU on Main Street Media, Utah. We're live on X, Rumble, YouTube, and our website, kmmu.org. Thanks for listening to Talk with John, folks. That's a place where you can go to watch these shows and all of our other shows with Michael Letts, as well as other hosts, as well as a few other guests. But the bottom line is you can go more. And please like, subscribe, and share so that can be so we can get out, reach more people with great hosts or great guests. Great, he should be a host, but great on talk here on Main Street Media, Utah. He is a host, but we having a great guest of Michael Letts with Invest USA. Let's get to. I also want to hit law enforcement experts analyze. Dr. Yates and I'm not sure on the other one released a devastating report that the Biden's DOJ investigated. And Dwayne, thanks for being here, brother. We appreciate you. Dwayne is off. So released a devastating report that Biden's DOJ investigation of Phoenix PD showed 97% of cited 114 incidents were false reporting. Due to this, Trump's DOJ has suspended and dropped all other investigations of police departments on radical DEI and civil rights issues. What's going on there?
Well, let me put it into easy terms that all of America can understand. There is what we call a compliance order that the Biden administration and Democrats for decades have been using to try to control local and state law enforcement across the country. And what is their basis and their premise? They say, oh, we got complaints against you, John, that you're being racist. So we come in very quickly and say, we looked at it. We agree. Now, here's your options. We're either going to criminally charge your department and take it over anyway, or we will issue a compliance order. And in that compliance order, basically, from the outside looking in, you're still the chief, you still wear the uniform, everything's great, hunky-dory. But we're running the show. And we will tell you what your policy manuals will be. We will tell you what your operational mode will be, and we will control it from this point on. Well, quite frankly, you will be shocked as to how many compliance orders are with agencies all across the country, not just Phoenix, just all across the country. So one of the things that this administration did, talk about the Trump administration, said, wow, that's an awful lot of racist departments in this country. We've got some real problems. Let's take a look at it. So we took one randomly, Phoenix, went in and analyzed it. And this is going to really make my blood boil. It does every time we talk about this. Here's what we found. Out of 114 complaints for which they base the fact that you are a racist department, that we either comply with our order or we're going to prosecute you criminally, we found that 97% were fabricated. They were outright lies. They weren't exaggerations. They lied about it, John. They created incidences that never occurred. And they did it just so that they could take over state and local law enforcement because they weren't satisfied with corrupting and politicizing the federal forces that they were already doing. Now, if you're talking about treason, I can't think of anything any worse than that. To lie on cops and tell the American public that they're racist, that they're buffoons, and you made it all up. I can't tell you, I'm trying to contain myself, John, what we should do to people who did that in the Department of Justice under Joe Biden.
Well, I think it's illegal and wrong to send them to El Salvador.
No, I think
maybe we
stick
him in the DC gulag. Maybe we stick him in the DC gulag.
That sounds like a great plan to me.
All right.
But you see why there's such distrust among the American people of our government right now? I mean, you did this to cops.
And it's false accusations. So what other false accusations are being made? And
That's just in that area. We haven't looked at anything else yet. We're still working on it.
So I want to know who's behind it. That sounds like something that George Soros's foundation would have a piece in.
We're trying to trace, one of the old adages in law enforcement, and any old cop like me will tell you this: follow the money. Follow the money, you'll follow the crime. So, quite frankly, be very interesting to see where all the funding was coming to do these initiatives. You're going to probably find out exactly what you just said. And its purpose was to destroy the institution of the United States of America that caused us to collapse from within. And quite frankly, we fought world wars across seas to keep America free. Why would we let them come over here and destroy us from within, John?
We shouldn't, but that's what they're trying to do. And that's what people like Alex and George Soros are doing. And a number of Democrats like Ilhan Omar. So let's hit that real quickly. Let's not forget she married her brother, supposedly, to come to the United, to get him to come to the United
supposedly,
States.
she did. The evidence is there. Let me tell you an interesting fact as we get into Representative Omar. This you will not find anywhere because I can't find any major media that wants to report on it. But we have in the Bureau done an analysis nationwide of where the majority of terrorism is coming from and being rooted, and recruits are being sought after. You realize by exponentially larger numbers. It's all coming out of Omar's district in Minnesota. Wonder why. They brought over, what was it, 50, 100,000? I'm trying to remember. I don't have my notes in front of me. How many Obama brought in from Somalia? Put them all in one spot, so they would have the ability to, even though they weren't citizens, because you remember it's illegal if you're not a citizen to vote, but they didn't care about the legalities. Let them all vote in a congressional race anyway, and put Omar in there, who has the audacity to not even condemn terrorism of 2 Jews being shot in New York, 2 diplomats. And quite frankly, she's not going to condemn what happened in Boulder, Colorado, I promise you, because of the fact that it was an Egyptian illegal immigrant Muslim, pro-Hamas, who did that, lighting those poor elderly on fire. What a horrible way to be injured, by being set on fire. I can't tell you the disgust we as a nation should have of people like Representative Omar, who don't represent America's interests, who represent foreign terrorist interests instead. Why we allow Congress to continue to have them as a member in the wells of the House of Congress is beyond me.
Okay, so at what point, we will not hear this. We hear anytime that there is a shooting. Well, okay, so let's get to gun rights. So when do we have a right to a flamethrower? I'm just curious on that one. I don't hear anyone coming out and saying I don't
Technically, you do.
I don't see David Hodge coming out and hollering about this incident. Nowhere to be found.
You know what the interesting part about this is? When Sunday's incident in Boulder, you do realize that Boulder, Colorado has the most stringent gun laws, one of the most stringent gun laws in America.
Yes, I do.
Why do you think nobody was able to take out this assailant until law enforcement arrives? Now, thank God law enforcement got there as quick as they did. But quite frankly, it could have been a whole lot better situation had citizens been armed and been able to deal with the situation before law enforcement even got there.
Had it been in Texas or Utah, that man would have been put down.
He would have been put down immediately, and there have been a lot of pain and anguish spared for these poor seniors. Where I get frustrated, John, is the left is trying to say, let's change the narrative. Let's talk about compassion. We want to have these illegal immigrants here because we want people to have a future or a hope. That's not compassion. That's a lie. What compassion is making sure we protect our children, our grandchildren, our elderly, our grandparents, and we're failing to do that right now by allowing activist judges to demand that these terrorists continue to reside in America. I think America's had enough of that kind of rhetoric.
So Ilhan Omar, let's hit her just a little bit more, but I do want to get into what happened in DC. The two, I guess, two Israeli embassy
Diplomats.
workers, and
Mhm.
then let's get into a little bit what happened in Denver. Rep so Representative Omar refuses to condemn the killing of two Israeli diplomats in the DC area by a pro-Hamas activists who happened to yell "Free, free Palestine" as he was being walked out the door. I mean, and this is the level of just crazy town on this one. He shot them, walked inside. People could see he was a little disheveled. Were worried about him. Asked him if he was okay. Went and got a bottle of water and wound up finding out. Come to find out, this guy was the shooter. And then on his way
Yep.
out, after being given a bottle of water, making sure that he was okay, he yells "Free, free Palestine." Now, I also think that was yelled by the guy with the flamethrower, if I remember
That's
correctly,
correct.
too. But so here's listen. I've got my listeners that are not the state of Israel fans. I'm fine with that. But here's what I am saying: this group of people, I don't see any other group that is going to this level of violence right now. We're being told that the white Christian male is has the greatest level of domestic terrorism. Yeah,
Correct.
I'm not seeing that anywhere either. So let's talk about real quickly what happened in DC. It seems like now here's the question: did this individual know that those two that he shot that were the Israeli worked for the Israeli embassy? Did he sit and watch them and look for them to come in? Was he going after them specifically, or was he just at an event where people happened to be showing up?
What the intelligence shows is that he knew they were employees of the embassy. Now, was he specifically saying, I want these two and nobody else? That is still being investigated. But he definitely knew who they were. He definitely knew what their occupation was, and he knew who he was targeting. So here's the broader picture, whether it's that or whether it's Colorado. We are talking about terrorists. In the previous administration, the Biden administration, we know that there are 1,200. This is documented. This is not hearsay. 1,200 members of the Taliban, of ISIS, and Al Qaeda that were brought here and allowed to disperse among our country. These are not members that are on the terrorist watch list. These are enemy combatants. We fought against these people in Afghanistan and Iraq. They killed American soldiers. And quite frankly, we had an administration that brought them and put them out on our streets. John, what does that tell you about that administration? Makes my blood boil. We've had in the last 60 days 20, maybe more, that have Iranians, Palestinians, pro Hamas, that are on terrorist watch lists that have crossed from the northern sector from Canada into the northwest. Look here, when you hear the excuses that this is lone wolves that are terrorists making these attacks, Tom Holman was very clear yesterday. This is the tip of the iceberg, and it's a misnomer to say they're lone wolves. Quite frankly, there is a network of terrorism and an organization across this country that it's time that we get serious. Here's why we've designated them as domestic terrorists. It gives the president the authorization to invoke military action, special forces, because it's time that we go in and we make sure that we clean and exterminate these big people within our country. They either move them out. I prefer to move them out in a body bag because they're here for one reason. They're here to kill Americans. And quite frankly, that's warfare. We're good at it. Our special forces are the best in the world. Let's put them to use and make sure we protect America and make it safe once again.
Oh, come on, Michael. That's a bunch of hype. And then,
not at all.
okay, now, what about China? What about the Chinese soldiers that are in America that have bought up land? Right. Okay. So when I saw
Same
what
position.
happened in when I saw what happened in Russia that was done by Ukraine, And
Mm-hmm.
everybody's like, well, look how terrible Russia is and how incompetent they are. We've got the same problem brewing right here in the United States with all those terrorists that we let in, all of the
Exactly.
unvetted terrorists that walk across, all the Hamas supporters, and anything happens with China, they're right by our Air Force bases. I mean, have property right
Yes.
next to it.
Well, before we changed administrations, they were the main supplier for fentanyl, for the chemicals to try to kill off our young people and our law enforcement and military age personnel. They had 13 police stations. We've shut them down now, by the way, operating within the United States borders. They bought up our farmland to make sure that they can control our food supply. And they bought, as you said, key property that gives them great surveillance ability, some of our most sensitive military installations. And quite frankly, they have also purchased property next to key infrastructure locations so they can knock out power grids, water treatment plants, sewer treatment plants, etc. Quite frankly, they can put a real hurting on us. And so it's the same as we just talked about. I'm not trying to be exclusive and just say let's go after the Palestinians or the Taliban or this or that. We need to go after domestic terrorist threat, period. Whether it's Chinese, whether it's Palestinian, whether it's Iranian, whether it is Afghanistan, whatever it may be, those who are here, who are on the terrorist watch list, who are fought against us and tried to destroy us from without and are now coming from within. It's time they either quickly get out of this country or we'll help them get out. And they're not going to like it. We're going to help them get out.
I think we just start cleaning house.
There's no question.
And I don't think we just do special forces. I mean, it's got to happen. My concern is soon as it start happening on any form of level, and if they feel like especially the Chinese feel like, hey, they're actually going to be coming for us, they're just going to shut us down by launching whatever plans they have. They're not going to hold on to them. They're just going to do it.
No. But quite frankly, John, let me give you the flip side of that argument.
You said
you're not
no.
wrong, but let me give you the flip side. They're going to do that anyway. If they didn't have the intent of doing that, they would have never come here to begin with. So that's coming. That's in the cards. We know that terrorist attacks are being planned on this soil, regardless. So the best defense is an aggressive offense, and we need to keep that in mind. And let's start cleaning it up now before it gets to the point to where there's a lot of Americans.
Can we go after them in 24 hours? Can we get the vast majority of them in 24 hours with law enforcement, with the military, and maybe we deputize a bunch of citizens and say, see that house? Fire at anybody in that house.
Well, here's what one of the things.
Let me be more specific, because that could be misconstrued and that could be stated. Someone could play that, and I could be in court. Let me be very clear that they've been deputized, that they have a sheriff with them, and they say if anybody comes out of the house or start doing anything wrong improperly, we just fire on them, and we ask questions later. Because the bottom line is, folks, it's what happened in Russia from Ukraine. I think that is a very mild thing of what's going to happen here in the United States.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of merit to what you say. Here's what I want to make sure our listeners understand. Let's again talk about logistics and where we're at as of today. When the Biden administration was sworn in, we had roughly 1.4 million sworn personnel, law enforcement personnel across this great land. When he left, we had probably a little over 700,000. That shows you how bad a condition we're in as we speak. So what I propose to the president is that every retired law enforcement officer who is willing to do so, and I pray that there would be every one of them would be willing to consider this, that they be given a deputy U.S. Marshal Commission and be federalized and come back out on the streets. I mean, I know you're in retirement. Maybe you can only dedicate 1, 2, 3 days a week, but come back out and let's dump 200,000 officers overnight back out onto the streets and see if we can't get this matter under control.
All right, boy. Well, we're an hour in, and we still not halfway through
We're
everything.
gonna need a whole week.
And I've been saving some of the big ones, for last.
You better start unleashing them.
Let's hit Doge Commission. The Doge Commission has officially submitted. This blew me away. This is not out in the news. I
No.
have not heard this in the news. Doge Commission has officially submitted 163 members of Congress for immediate IRS audits. 156 reportedly are Democrats.
Now
Boy,
let's clarify that, because I'm the one that gave it to you. Let's talk about what it is, but we're looking at what it means. First of all, an emergency IRS audit means that the IRS is to drop whatever cases they're working on and immediately assume, because these are top priority for national security. Okay, so it's not like, okay, yep, put it on the stack and get to it in 6 months, 2 years, whatever. No, it takes immediate action. Second of all, the figure that you're looking at was an ongoing figure. That figure is up to over 200. I think it is 200. And, I can't remember the last that I saw in the last 24 hours, but it's way over 200. Now, what is it that would cause an emergency audit from the Doge Commission? Basically, it's this. You came in, John, with $10 in your pocket, and now you're walking around with 20 million, 30 million, 40 million on a salary of 174,000 a year. Don't quite see how you got that figure. And so that's why we want the IRS to immediately move forward. Now, what is significant in this discussion? You remember Al Capone. Everybody remembers Al Capone, or I hope you do anyway. We never could get the mafia on normal criminal charges. They were too smart. They were managed to get great legal representation. They weaseled their way out. So he sucked the IRS on them. And on there, and that was black and white. Their figures, where the money was coming from, the illegality, et cetera, et cetera. And quite frankly, we issued the indictments for there. Once we got that ball started, Al Capone never saw daylight again. Do you see now the significance of going after, through the IRS, members who are doing a number of things? You remember, we have shown USAID. We now have evidence that money, billions of dollars, that goes to USAID, was either given to Ukraine or given to NGOs, probably even trillions of dollars. I'm a little short on the amount of money there. And those NGOs, you remember how they work? They're non-governmental organizations. They're
right.
supposed to be nonprofits. But what is they're allowed to do is say, John, I want you to serve on my board. I always thought you serve for free as a nonprofit. Oh, no. We're going to pay you $1 million to be a board member. Well, what do I have to do? Nothing. Yeah, nothing. We don't even meet. We may call you once every 3 months and say, hey, here's what we sent you over an email. This is what we did. I hope you approve of it. And quite frankly, that's how many members of Congress have been enriching themselves. We know that to be a fact. And so, quite frankly, instead of, because you say, well, just go lock them up for doing that. Understand the legalities, okay? If I just lock you up for that, John, you can come back and say, well, hey, Congress voted on that. That was part of the appropriations bill. I did nothing wrong. However, if you got that money and took it and put it into an offshore account and didn't report it and didn't pay taxes on it, aha, now you got a little different story. So guess what, folks? Congress is sweating and sweating pretty bad at the moment, because we found an avenue now that we're going to go after. Let's see where it leads.
Where is this? Okay, so I haven't heard this in the news. How have you heard about it, or what can you share?
You can look at it, Doge Commission there. If you go to their website, you will find it. It's not being reported. And quite frankly, they're not, the Doge Commission is not interested in standing up and doing flashing lights on it either. But it is a fact. And you can go and take a look at it yourself. And why are they not trying to make a big deal out of it? You do understand the implications of this. You remember, I have been saying for some time, John, if this administration, talking about the Trump administration, is to truly succeed, we have to drain the swamp. You can't, remember, we've got a problem with judiciary, activist judges. You say, well, impeach them. Well, the only people that can impeach judges is Congress. Do you think Congress is going to impeach judges that are doing nefarious activities when they're doing the same thing themselves? So we've got to start making
They
arrests
especially
of
aren't
people
going
who
to
are
do that.
abusing it.
They especially
Correct.
aren't going to do that, especially when those activist judges can let them go.
Exactly. So what do we have to do? Well, it's time that we start making sure investigations are underway, start finding, holding people accountable. And when I say holding people, I'm talking about members of Congress, members of agencies, former presidents, former cabinets. We start holding them accountable. And when they start seeing their fellow colleagues being let out of handcuffs, you bar the door, Katie, because you're going to see a whole change in attitude then. And kind of like, hey, if you'll cut me a deal, I'll let you know who else is doing it. And you're going to start seeing some real change in America, in its judiciary, in its congressional actions, etc. Until that happens, you're going to see them dig in and fight every particular desire that the American public had for this administration and try to thwart it. And that's where we're at as of today.
Well, and why is the Democrat mainstream media not taught this?
You just hit the nail on the head. They're part of the situation. They're part of the problem.
That
I've been saying this recently on the air. I know nobody wants to hear this because I'm a firm believer. I know you are too, John. And freedom of speech and freedom of the press. But folks, freedom of the press was never meant to say that you can lie and present it as truth and not suffer any consequences. We're going to have to deal with that issue as well as we clean this country up.
well, and on top of that, well, okay, those are platitudes. So here's the realities, folks. If those congressmen get locked up, there's a ton of access that those Democrat reporters lose and a ton of
Correct.
information that they can't report on anymore. That's one of
Well,
the
and
reasons.
here's the other thing you need to be aware of. And I'm just well, you're really getting an earful, America. Is we can show you the data. This is factual. What I'm telling you. The mainstream press is getting billion, not trillions. Let's be specific. Is getting hundreds of millions, perhaps even billions, from the taxpayers. And how are
Operation
they doing
Mockingbird.
it? Yep, exactly. How are they doing it? They're saying, "Oh, well, as um, CNN or MSNBC, we have this special subscription that you can get insider information. And every agency needs to know what's going on behind the scenes so that they can plan for it accordingly to protect the American people. Of course, it's not free. You understand each subscription is $100,000, and you got a big government. You probably need 100,000 subscriptions so that everybody who should have access to this can have it. And then they've been getting this money for years. So we're funding mainstream media and their nefarious activities as well. And if we shut all this fraud and money laundering down, where's their money going to go to?
Dries up, disappears.
So everybody's in this to, hey, I got to protect my money. And I'll do whatever I can to protect my future, my financial future. That's where we're at, sadly, today in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, like I said, access and money are the two main reasons why the Democrat mainstream media is not talking about this. And you'll only hear it about places where Michael Letts is at and conservative side of the fence. Let's see. Trying to think the next thing that we want to get into.
I'm surprised they haven't pulled the plug on the station yet. We're doing a great job. Tell you, sir.
Okay, let's talk. Let's get in a little bit with actually American taxpayers. I loved what you shared with me. American taxpayers spent $2 billion per year on congressmen. So let's continue on the track of Congress. Salary, like you said, $174,000 a year.
We have
7 point
535 congressmen. That's Senate and House combined. We have 535 members of Congress at 174 minimum. Some of them get over 200,000 a year. So you see, you do the total. You were fixing to announce it, John. How much is that total just for the salaries?
7.6 million per year for okay, so I believe it says the MRA, the members representational. Okay, so 174,000, but let's just keep it 174,000. I am going to pull my calculator up real quick to make sure that I get these numbers right. 174 times 535, that would be, and then we add a z. Hold on. 174 times 535, just to make sure I'm right. That is $93 million, roughly.
Roughly. Okay.
Now, you said
Then
some
you've
of them
got their MRA. Yeah, some of them, like the speaker, committee members. And when I say committee members, committee chairs get more because I'm in charge of entire committee. I get paid more. I'm the speaker. I get paid a lot more. I'm the House Minority Leader. I get paid a lot more. So yeah, 174 is the baseline, but there's a lot of members of Congress that get another 20, 30,000 a year on top of that.
So
or whatever leadership role they have.
So here's a couple other things that their additional reimbursements happen on. $7.6 million per year for reimbursement. Their MRA
Meals.
mills.
Yeah. Can you imagine? I didn't realize I had to pay for your lunch and dinner every night too, John. Bad enough I'm paying you $124,000 a year, and I got to pay for lunch, dinner, and breakfast while you're there. Wow.
You know, you want a tasty meal every once in a while, right?
Well, and I understand $174,000 is just not enough for you to feed yourself. So I guess I'm responsible for feed you too while I got you there.
The MRA, the members representational allowance, is $810 million. What is that?
You get a piece of mail, John, that's got a congressman's signature on the left-hand corner instead of a stamp that says, "Look at all the wonderful things I'm doing." That's all of America gets. You didn't ask for it. You probably could care less. You get it anyway. That is what you're paying for. That's $860 million. We give Congress roughly $1.5 million per congressman. A little bit more than that. Money for postage. And here's the great part about it from their standpoint. They don't use it for postage because they control the post office. All their postage is free. They don't have to pay because all they have to do is have their signature stamped where the post office, where the postal stamp goes, and it goes for free. So supposedly that's being used for postage, but obviously it's not. Now, what would they argue on the flip side? Well, somebody got to pay for that brochure. I'm not going to pay for it. I mean, there's printing. There's my staff that have to put all the labels on it. Yeah, it costs me a lot to stay in touch with my constituency. They need to know how the great job I'm doing. Here's the truth of the matter. The only reason it's being used is so that I get my name out in front of you every couple of years to make sure you keep voting for me, send me back to Congress. I'm telling you how great I am, and you're paying for it. What a deal, huh?
Yes. So operational costs, $754 million for the House expense and $250 million for the Senate expense. U.S. Congress is getting 18 weeks of vacation this year. Congress will work only 133 days in 2025. Okay, now I would say on this, I'm fine with them working very few days. The less days they're in office, the less they're spending my money. But I'm not a big fan of all that other stuff that's coming their way.
Well, here's the funny part about it. I'm going to take what you said, carry a step further. Who in America would love to get paid $174,000 for 130 days of work? I'm all agree with you wholeheartedly. Let's only let him work 30 days a year, but I'm only going to pay you for 30 days. I'm not going to pay you $174,000 for 130 days of work. How ridiculous is that to the American people? What an insult! And quite frankly, when you're talking about the other things we just mentioned, who do you think pays for these junkets when these congressmen run over to El Salvador and say, "I demand that these terrorists be sent back to the U.S. The president had no authority to take these terrorists away from our country"? Who do you think just paid for their trip? Trust me, folks, they don't fly coach. They don't stay in Motel 6, and they don't eat at McDonald's. So guess who's paying for it all? You and I, John. And that's why I make the comment at the end of that. Look at how much we're spending and what are we getting in return? I challenge any American right now listening to this show. Call John and tell him how wonderful the benefits are you're getting from our members in Congress. Show me something positive that's worth $2 billion a year. I dare you to try.
That'll be crickets, I'll tell you that much.
Exactly right.
Okay, so let's get into the FBI and Kash Patel.
Well, we're really going to get.
All right,
you're really asking for it now.
Let's start with not. I don't want to go after at the moment Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, but I'm saving the best for last, in my opinion, or at least some of the best for last. FBI Director Patel announces criminal probes into the, and this was in the headlines that were brought us into the show. FBI Director Patel announces criminal probe into New Jersey State Attorney General Letitia James. What is the basis of the probe? Status on 34 counts. So she likes to trumpet that Donald Trump had 34 felony counts against him for basically
I'm glad you mentioned that, John.
State fraud.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned. Let me tell you why I'm glad you mentioned. Here was the line that the Democratic platform used during the last election. How dare you vote for a man who is a convicted felon, 34 counts? You're going to vote for a felon to be the president of the United States? Shame on you. Well, now let's take a look what really happened. You remember, he said he was going to appeal that case because of the fact that the fraud, and we're going to talk about the fraud from the New York Attorney General in just a second. But you know what the appeals court found? No basis. They threw out all 34 counts. And not only did they throw them out, they ordered that Donald J. Trump be reimbursed for every legal expense he had incurred in such a felonious and unmerited, unwarranted indictment and accusation. Did you see that in the mainstream news by any chance, John?
I sure did not hear that in the mainstream media. I didn't hear that anywhere.
So quite frankly, to say that he was a convicted felon is a falsehood and a lie. He is not any much of a convicted felon. It was all thrown out, and the state of New York was castigated for its total obnoxious and fraudulent cases against Donald J. Trump. You didn't hear a word. Now, to make matters worse, you find out that the Attorney General from New York, Letitia James, is now being under investigation by the FBI, by Kash Patel, for actually more than two. This is old news. They've actually discovered, they've gone back a little ways. There seems to be a pattern. She was involved in real estate development. Oops, I wonder how she wasn't very successful at it. And what she seems to have done is everything from listing her dad as her husband so that she would get more favorable terms, have a better chance of qualifying for a mortgage. She listed particular homes as her primary residency so she could get the 4% instead of the 6% tax break, which made it a lot cheaper for her to be able to rent those out and make money off of them. She lied in a particular purchase in New York, saying that the building had 4 units when it had 5. That supposedly would make it cheaper and the property valuation, less taxes. She's been doing this for quite some often. It is criminal charges. Quite frankly, folks, you don't hear that either, do you? She's on a criminal investigation. Now, here's what's so scary for her. If this proceeds, and not if, it is proceeding. Make no mistake, the investigation is not being contemplated. It is active, file is open, and it is underway. And if it appears that half of what is said is true, it will be federal felonies, okay? She will lose her law license. She will be removed from office, and she will be sitting in an orange suit behind bars. Same one that was giving you the silly grin. Look what I did to Donald Trump. Ha! Got him, didn't I? Okay. Coming back now, isn't it?
So I want to know if that'll be done in New York or where her state of residence is. I believe it's Virginia.
Well, that's going to be determined by this criminal investigation because technically she's claiming it's New York, which is fine if it's New York, but you can't have a primary residency in both. So which one's it going to be? And now we're finding out there are other cases besides. She's not just gotten or tried to get property in those 2 states. There are other states as well. So she's got her hands full. And here's the saddest part about it, and I know we don't really want to get on a rabbit trail, but how is she paying for all these defenses? Well, the New York Attorney General's office has a fund that when an attorney general is sued, which is supposed to be because you get sued in the pursuit of your office. You know, people always disagree with it, and that's typical. People sue the attorney general's office all the time. That is what is used to defend the attorney general, but it should never be used for defending a personal liability for anybody, attorney general, or anybody else. But yet she's cooking the books to use these funds, taxpayer funds, for her defense. Does corruption never end, John?
No, it doesn't. All right, so folks, so one thing I want to make clear: she's got her stated, so she's got a stated residence that that her primary residence. I want to say it's in Virginia. I could be wrong.
That is correct. No, she stated her primary residency is Virginia and New York. She put on the same on both, but you can't have a primary residency in both places. It's got to be one or the other.
Like I said, my question is, where's she going to be tried at? Obviously, I would love to see this. I'd love to see this go to court, and I'd like to see her explain this away. And so far, she hasn't done a very good job. Bottom line is, she made statements about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump. All she claimed is that Donald Trump over-exaggerated an
appraisal.
Appraisal, right?
Correct.
Now,
which he had nothing to do with. An appraisal company did that, not Donald Trump.
Right. And on top of that, the bottom line is, like you said, it was the appraisal company, but part of the whole appraisal process is it's supposed to go through underwriting. An underwriter that from the side doing the loan didn't have any questions, and guess what? Boom. They don't have any questions, and the amount was paid back.
Correct. See, to give a further little quick note on this particular case, the listeners might want to be aware of, is you asked where's she going to be tried. There are a number of trials for this. New York will feel like it was defrauded if you said it was primary, so you got your taxes cut from 6 to 4%, and it really should have been 6. So New York has a case against her. Virginia has the same case. Which is it going to be? If you're paying us 4 and you should have been paying us 6, Virginia will have a case, plus the feds, because you remember mortgages are underwritten by federal mortgage protection, and that means if you lie on that, that's a federal offense. So she's got a lot of different courts she's going to be in, John, not just 1 or 2.
Well, let's hope that we. I'm sorry. I want to see her go to jail. Maybe not go. I hate to say that, but I want to see her having some comeuppance. At least have a bunch of public humiliation, and hopefully the Democrat Party will start to be revealed. Now, I'm not saying that the Republican Party is much better, but are golden childs. But the bottom line is, the Democrats, one of these two parties. Now, at the Republican convention, maybe some people went and got abortions for what they did at the Republican convention. But at the Democrat convention, they basically had an altar of Moloch right there on site for people to come and get abortions on site. So that's, to me,
paid for by the taxpayers.
To me, that's the difference. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next topics. Yes, paid for by a bunch of taxpayers and people that were happy to let them have the funds. All right.
Correct.
Back to our list. Let's get to FBI director and intelligence agencies announced that, contrary to the liberal Democrat assertions, the Venezuelan government under Maduro is supporting Tren de Aragua to invade and destabilize the U.S.?
We've been saying that for some time. The Democrats have been saying it's a conspiracy. Now the evidence is there, undisputable evidence, that quite frankly, our intelligence agencies know that Tanya Argueta, you understand, suddenly they just popped up. Nobody knew about it before. And they didn't just pop up as one or two guys walking across the country. They were well organized. They were all over the country. They're in every state of the union and aggressively moving forward. Remember, they're the kind that love torture. They're using AK-47s. These are the bad boys, okay? So the question becomes, how do they explode overnight? What we've known for some time, but now we were able to prove it through intelligence sources, is that they're in partnership with the Venezuelan government. The Venezuelan government is supporting logistically, financially, their expansion to try to destabilize America and to try to cause us to crumble from within. And quite frankly, that's an act of war. And I realize you say, why am I being a little hesitant? When you take a look at all the corruption we're talking about, and we've just started, John, I told you it's going to take us days to get through your show. Add that to the list. We got a lot of things we need to get done, but make sure you're aware, Mr. President Madera. We know your intention, and we're not going to overlook it. So just you better keep looking over your shoulder.
Well, this is the other thing, though. There are definitely Democrats, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few Republicans that received a lot of money, donations to campaigns and so forth from these cartels, from China.
No question.
And that's
it's just sickening when you see how they sold our country out, John. And you know, talking about the FBI, I'll go ahead and give this real quick. You may have it on the list. We'll go ahead and address it now. Here's some of the things that Cash and Dan have been doing. Obviously, we've been concerned that we haven't been moving as fast as we need to. We are addressing that internally. But quite frankly, here are some of the reasons. And I'm not here to make excuses. You just need to have transparency and know the facts. Two things have come out in the last 7 days, maybe. First of all, we have discovered now some rooms within the complex, some of our complexes, FBI complexes, unbeknownst, that are stuffed with files that have been attempted to be destroyed or eradicated. Okay, we're talking about everything from Epstein to other issues. Second of all, our mainframe computer system for the Bureau has had a classification system that was created, maybe we're tracking it now, maybe a couple of decades ago, to hide and to bury information from agents within the agency. It was only for eyes of top personnel. Well, we got that based on a whistleblower that said, hey, you may want to look at this. We've cracked it, at least some initially, and the kind of evidence that we're finding is nefarious. Okay. It's the same thing we're talking about, whether it's names they were trying to eradicate from Epstein, whether it was the Russiagate, whether it was attempting to use blackmail on individuals through sex trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. We ain't even got to all the bottom of this yet. And quite frankly, it's going to be enough to make you sick, literally, for quite some time.
Okay. I want to make sure that I understood you correctly. Did you say that there are rooms in
Correct.
FBI
files.
offices?
Yes, with
that
files
had
that
that
have
information
that were attempted to be hidden. In fact, we found files stuffed behind toilets, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's just what you had in the previous administrations. I'm not talking about White House administrations. I'm talking about Christopher Wray, James Comey, Robert Mueller, et cetera. Seems to be a pattern of utilizing, politicizing, and weaponizing these agencies to do nefarious activities, and then making sure that the activities are kept under wraps so that nobody knows. And when there's a change in leadership, they just made sure that those files, instead of destroying them, thank God they didn't, They were just made sure that they were put in the sections where nobody would ever find them. Same thing within their mainframes. Well, guess what? It's taking us a little while, but we're finding it. And our goal and objective, and we have the commitment from this administration, talking about the Trump administration and from Cash and Dan, is we are going to make sure that every action is held accountable for, including actions that we had thought had been closed. You said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Did you ever
What
get a
are you-
resolution, John, to who had the cocaine at the White House? Did you ever get a resolution as to the background on the attempted assassinations of Trump? These are just a couple. I mean, did you ever get any resolution to who leaked the precursor decision on the abortion decision by the Supreme Court? No. Guess what? You say, well, because we couldn't find out. That's a bunch of BS. We couldn't find out who did the pipe bombs on January the 6th. BS. We are now reopening those files that were closed prematurely. Why were they closed prematurely? They didn't like the
Right.
direction it was headed. They didn't like who was going to implement and implicate. So, we've looked here long enough. There's nothing here. Let's move on. Nope, we're going to go back. And America is going to know just how corrupt this government has been.
Okay, so let's hit. Well, I'm gonna.
You're speechless.
No, not speechless. I'm trying to figure out what I bring up next, because I do want to get to Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and my confidence in them is much lower now than it was a month
Well,
ago.
you got me now. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Put it out there.
I want to hit Robert. I want to hit. I do want to mention. Do want to talk about seashells.
Sure. Here's what's interesting about Comey.
All of a sudden, Comey happened to take a picture of some seashells that said 8647. Now, and it only had his large footprints around those seashells. One, he said he just happened to walk upon it, right? And take a picture of it.
Correct.
Now, what position did he hold at the FBI? Was it just...
He was the director.
He was the director. So I'd like to think that guy has an understanding of if I put 86 the president, what does 86 the president mean? It means get rid of.
Yep. Everybody knows it. He knows it.
Why do you think he thought so? Tell me what you think was going on in his mind. How he thought he could.
Well, let's take a look at it very quickly from a law enforcement standpoint. First of all, John, I'm sure everybody listening to my voice and your voice has been to the beach at some point in time and has gone out for a walk on the beach in the morning and seen the shells that have come in. I challenge anyone listening to my voice to find that many shells that are identical that you could put that together to begin with. That was an AI generated picture. That's not even real. Well, second of all, so he generates an AI picture. Now you've proven motive. You didn't walk upon something. You deliberately created something. Well, why would you do that? Oh, well, let's make sure America understands. I've got a book coming out next week, and nobody's going to buy it unless I'm back ahead of the news. So I'll take the risk. It's going to be negative, but any publicity, positive or negative, is better than none at all. So let me go ahead and do this. I know I'll grab the attention, which he did. Give him credit. He grabbed headlines. His book came out the first of the next week, and quite frankly, I'm sad to report, but his strategy was successful. Yeah, book did probably a little bit better than it would have had he not played this ploy. Now, what is the flip side? Why should he be held accountable? Because we had to divert assets because a lot of people saw that and made a copycat threat to the president. You say, well, that was all a bunch of, nobody believed it. No, we can't operate that way. Every threat that is made against the president has to be investigated and has to be vetted. So now we've had to divert countless operational manpower to track down a bunch of, yes, we know that they're not really, substantial threats. but we won't know that until we've got him. So he cost
and
the president time, effort, cost you and I the assumption that it could have been somebody really believing that and try to do a copycat thing. Just was a stupid move, John.
And the other thing is it gives a bunch of runway to some yokel that would put the same type of threat out. You know, if it's okay for a former deputy director of the FBI to do that, right?
Correct.
Is he deputy director or director? But
No, he was director. He was director.
Former director of the FBI. If he has the First Amendment right to say that, what does it mitigates and allows for tons and tons of room for the regular American public. Because when someone in law enforcement, especially someone high in an administration, which he was both, when someone, he's got a law degree. When someone like that does it and gets away with that type of scenario, even if he doesn't get away with it, it just says, hey, well, if he can do it, why can't I say those type of things?
Yeah, I mean, you see the issues that it creates, and as being your former director, I don't care that his motive was, according to his words, innocuous. Remember, initially he tried to throw his wife under the bus. Oh well, it was my wife told me what it meant. I didn't even know what it meant. Nah, quit pulling her in and trying to throw her under the bus. You did it. You did it for a reason, to try to gain publicity for your upcoming book. You didn't. You knew the consequences. You didn't care about the consequences.
Michael, I'd even say if it was true, he's a coward.
He is.
So he should have just, let's say that what he said was true, that it was his wife did it, pointed it out to him, and gave it to him. He should have manned up and just left her out of the picture and said, yeah, that was me.
Yeah, no question. It shows. Here is the most discouraging thing for America. This is the kind of leadership that we've had in this country for some time now. And you wonder why we're in such a mess? It's hard to find good people anymore. It's especially hard to find people that have any value, patriotism, and principles that love America. And that's why we're struggling at the moment. America, I'm asking you to step up, because I know there's plenty of people in America that still have values and principles. It's time we take this country back.
All right, so let's continue on. So the FBI director, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino discussed the Epstein file.
He did.
Money laundering and fraud by elected officials. So we've somewhat covered that, but I want to get into Dan Bongino and Kash Patel saying Epstein hung himself, and that the shooter in Pennsylvania was a lone wolf. Both of those things you and I have talked about. I believe those things to be completely untrue. I was listening to a interview of a gentleman who supposedly actually designed those rooms that Epstein was in, and he said that the type of things, everything that's in there is designed so, like, if it's a coat hanger, or a coat hook, it would break with the weight of a man. Correct. The shower head is designed to, let's see if I can get designed to face down, right?
Correct. And it will snap off if you put that kind of weight on it.
So, and then let's put that to aside. The guys that were supposedly watching him fell asleep. The cameras just happened to go out at the same time they fell asleep. I mean, there's a whole bunch of so it makes me go, when people were saying, Epstein, he's actually still alive somewhere, it actually makes me think that there's a higher likelihood of that. So I admit I'm Mr. Crazy Town right here. I don't believe those two, and they are starting to lose a whole lot of confidence in my eyes. So, your thoughts, Mike?
Well, let's put it. Let's take a look at the whole scenario, the whole speech, and understand what was said.
So they
And
said,
first of all, I agree with you. I think it was very poorly handled and how it was presented. But now let's go back and look at the interview itself. You'll notice right before that, they were talking about and saying that, look, we've only been on the job for what 70 days because it took a while to get up sworn in, etc. We've been on the job for 70 days. Here's what we've discovered: that we cannot promise you that files weren't destroyed. We know that files are missing. We're discovering them behind toilets, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still a lot of evidence that we don't even have access to. Now, remember, that was the comment. Then the next question was, what do you think about Epstein? Now, understand from a law enforcement perspective. He is the chief law enforcement officer, he and Dan. What they're saying is this: based on, we're not saying that this is true. What we are saying is the evidence that we have. Not saying that we have all the evidence, not saying that there's evidence missing that hasn't been destroyed, but the evidence that we have to go to trial, we do not have enough evidence. The only evidence we have would validate that he committed suicide. That's what they were attempting to say. Not that that is our position. There is nothing else. There's no question he committed suicide. The question is based on the evidence that we have, and be very clear that evidence may or may not be accurate. We do know that there's stuff missing. We know that there was stuff destroyed. We're still trying to piece it together. But as of today, if we had to go to trial to prove this, we don't have enough. There is no evidence other than to substantiate that he committed suicide. That's what
okay,
they were attempting to say. They did a very poor job of doing it.
but they didn't even, in my opinion, they didn't even come close to saying that.
That's why I just said they did a very poor job in doing that.
Okay, so let's also talk about the attempted presidential assassination in Pennsylvania.
Same principle.
I don't believe so. I think there's
And I agree
legitimate
with you.
questions. I believe there are legitimate questions, and I think it's fair to say where there are two shooters, not just one.
Yes. Hey, quite frankly, I think there's a lot of questions, but let's expound on it a step further here, John. I mean, knowing that there are rooms with files they tried to destroy or hide evidence, knowing there are files within the mainstream that they didn't want you to discover,
The
why do
mainframe.
you go to why do you go to all those efforts if there's not something to hide? And so don't bark at people when you've shown that you've not been transparent. And I'm not saying they, I'm talking about the Bureau as a whole over
Yeah.
decades has not been transparent. It has withheld information from the American people. I get it that as a chief prosecutor, basically, you have to be able to back up what you say. He committed suicide. You better have the evidence to prove it. He did this. You better have the evidence. And we don't have all the evidence. I get that. But don't bark at people for having questions about their government when they have every right to do so based on the evidence of what's happened over decades, not just over days, over decades.
Okay, but I don't know of them releasing anything post that interview saying we did not say. So I do remember their
They haven't.
verbiage was the files that I have something to the effect of the files that I have or the files that I reviewed show that
Show that he
Epstein
committed
committed
suicide. Correct.
suicide and that the shooter in Pennsylvania acted alone. I will give you that was basically the rough message is the files that I currently have. But that is not the message I received. The message the message that I received and the rest of America pretty much received. In fact, good old Ben Shapiro saying, "Hey, you conspiracy theory guys are completely whacked. You've got your two top guys, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and he's telling you that your conspiracy theories are up in the night." And
I
so
agree.
Dan Bongino and Kash Patel have not come out and said anything to say let us be clear. The files that we currently have, nothing's been released along those lines. And that's the frustration that I have. And so here's what happens on our side is people like me that try to bring this information to the public and say, I don't believe that Epstein killed himself, that I don't believe the lone shooter in Pennsylvania he wasn't a lone shooter. When I bring up that and all the reasons behind it, a guy like Ben Shapiro can go, well, that's not what they said. And it's your guy.
And what makes it even more frustrating, and we've had these discussions already, folks, is that look,
Who's we?
not
I've
only
got to ask, who do you mean by we? You and I? And people like you and
no,
I?
I'm talking about within DC. And quite frankly, here's what you've done furthermore than just raise the issue of Epstein and the assassinations. What you have done is you have created a sense that are you withholding? Are you hiding? I don't see any indictments coming as well. I see a lot of verbiage but no action. And you've just, instead of giving confidence to the American people,
You
you've
just made
actually
me
done the
think you're
opposite.
part of the cover up.
And that's tragic, because do I think they are? No. I think that Dan and Cash are trying to do the right thing. But sometimes missteps are made, and then quite frankly, you don't want to, especially if you're just coming in as a new guy, you don't want to act like you're capable of missteps. That gets you in trouble, John.
Okay, so Michael, I want to make sure that I understand correctly, and I pressed you hard on this one.
Sure.
I pressed you hard, and so I even started out with, do you believe that Epstein hung himself?
No.
Your answer to that is
absolutely not.
And do you think that the Pennsylvania shooter acted by himself and is a lone gunman, totally acted by himself, no support from anyone else, including being in front of an FBI building and having his phone ping, him
Right.
having I believe it was no spoons in his apartment or something like that?
I can tell you this. I said this on an interview just right before I came on your show. The concept of a lone wolf is a misnomer. There are no such things as lone wolves. Everyone has a support system. This would be no different. And quite frankly, just because you don't have all the facts to prove it in court does not mean you should step forward and try to close a case just to try to say, okay, don't want to hear about it anymore. Let's move on. That makes matters worse, not better.
And then so here's what I'm starting to hear on so I was really looking forward to our conversation. So I want to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly. Do you still have confidence in Kash Patel and Dan Bongino?
I have limited confidence. Let me just say again, we can't discuss things that have been said in confidence, but here's where the confidence lies. Right now, America's shaking, and if you want to do anything about it, we better quit talking and we better start showing some action, and major action. And quite frankly, we better go back and readdress some issues. But right now, we could readdress those at a little later date, as long as we start seeing some action taken to bring down some people who have been nefarious in their actions. I'm talking about big players. Don't just go arrest a little magistrate that nobody's heard of. I'm talking about players that have been treasonous to this country. You start doing the job and making sure it gets done, and we aggressively are pursuing that, we'll go in and make up and fix the mistakes that have been made so far. We don't do that, I don't care what you do. You're going to lose momentum. You're going to lose the trust of the American people.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you think that they are still trying to move forward? They're trying to dot their I's and cross their T's, and you think that they're going to wind up, to me, Epstein and the shooter of the president. The shooter of the president is a big deal. Epstein,
No
not
question.
such a big deal. But so one of the big problems that I have is, why have we not heard any of the names of the people that are involved, of the
Epstein?
Johns from the Epstein? And
Quite frankly, I can tell you the answer to that one. And here's where we're at. It is what it is. We're not saying that's not going to happen because I quite frankly believe it will. But this is such a touchy issue for national security. You say, what do you mean? We're not talking about just what happened on American shores. We're talking about intelligence agencies all across the world that participated. This was an operational that we spearheaded, quite frankly, that involved entrapment, that involved putting people in nefarious positions for the purpose of utilizing for blackmail. Now, I'm not in any way justifying their actions, okay? I don't care if you were tempted or not. If you succumb to the temptation, you're going to be held accountable. Period. Okay. Don't try to give me an excuse that, well, if I had been there, I would have done that. Well, I'm sorry. You made that decision. You need to be held accountable for it. But it involves so many players globally. It's having to be done very carefully how we proceed because it can create huge conflict, global conflict, if all this stuff gets not handled and dumped out the right way.
okay, so what I'm kind of interpreting what you happen to say is Prince Andrew is one of the people that are named.
That's
Okay.
one of so many that
So,
we don't have time to go through them all.
but my guess is there's a bunch of other big leaders of state, and I'm gonna tie in Sean Diddy Combs. Sean
Yep.
Diddy Combs. There's a bunch of people that are famous for saying there ain't no party like a Diddy party. One of
Yep.
them is LeBron James. LeBron James, right as this information starts coming out, stops playing it, has to take a mental health break from the NBA for like 5 days, right in the middle of a playoff run.
Yep.
Folks, I'm questioning what's really going on there. Then another name who is famous with these to have talked about these parties and been around these parties was Barack Obama.
Yep.
So we
You,
have
you have to add it all together. And let me tell you how I'm being careful what I say, but I'm expecting the American people to have some common sense. Okay, the biggest industry in the world is child sex trafficking. Okay, bigger than even drugs, the cartel. What there's
is it the
huge
biggest
money.
industry or is it the
Yes,
industry that has the most power?
it's the biggest industry. Let me tell you why I make that statement. Not just financially. It's a combination of what you said. It's the power and the money. And you remember you got to have both or you don't get anywhere. So this industry has huge power globally. It has the power to rise and destroy governments and countries. You don't think that's already been done? And quite frankly, you don't know how many people who have perished because of these activities. You don't know how many people who, if you found out, would rise up, rightly so, and demand justice. And say if a country was involved, I don't want you just to hand over 2 or 3 people that were logistical support. I think the country should be held accountable for having participated as government in this. You would create a world war like you've never seen before. And that has to be weighed and accounted as to how it's handled. But quite frankly, it has got to come out because there won't be any healing. You can't cover up sin and expect to prosper, John.
No, that's the main key is we can't cover this up. And this to me, this is like the biggest sin.
Oh, there's no question. Nobody's going to argue that.
So something that makes me have a little question in my mind when it comes to the Diddy trial. One of the people that was brought in was referred to as the Punisher.
Yes.
Anybody that
I'm familiar.
understands satanic ritual abuse,
Mm-hmm.
they have a Punisher.
Yep.
I have not heard from the Diddy trial, but either my suspicion is, and we've heard that there is evidence of satanic ritual abuse with with Epstein being involved.
Correct.
If Sean Diddy Combs was not actually doing satanic ritual abuse, he had people that taught him that were involved in satanic ritual abuse. So to me, that's why it is so evil, and we must overcome this, and why
Yes.
the fact that Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino don't come out and say, all the files that I currently have reviewed show that do not show anything more than he acted alone. Had they come out and said it that way, I would have a little bit more confidence.
I would
But
agree. I mean, I don't think it's been handled the best way it could have been handled. And quite frankly, the only way I think that we recover from this, and this is what my position is it's time to quit playing politics, start holding people accountable. When I mean people, I'm talking about the main instigators, okay? I'm not talking about the janitor. And as that occurs, and other people begin to turn on other people, and we really begin to start getting a cleansing, we have the opportunity then to correct some missteps that have been made. Otherwise, you don't need to correct them if you're not going to do anything. It's just you know better than anybody else.
well, here's what I'm going to take after this conversation. I have a little bit more hope for Dan Bongino and Kash Patel than I did. Pam
Have that as
Bondi,
guarded hope. Let's wait
uh,
and see what their actions are. They've been talking plenty. I need to see action now.
well, okay, but I have a little bit more hope. And something tells me if you're not having conversations with those two directly, you're having conversation with people that are very close to them.
I didn't say we weren't having it directly.
Okay. All right. Then the other thing that I want to talk about, because as I've stated, someone I happen to know who is whose right hand person, shall we say, has sent me some videos that you happen to be looking to do a starting up an organization that will help some of these children.
Yeah, let me quickly explain what's going on there, because we've talked about it on a number of national shows, even today. I think I've been on 10 shows so far today. And quite frankly, here's where we're at. If you've ever been involved with rescuing children out of child sex operations, sex trafficking, what you see, this is what happens. Your teams come together, full tactical gear. We go in on a raid, kick in the doors, lock down those who are abusing these children. And these children have suffered such abuse, I don't dare not even try to describe it on the air. You'll make everybody throw up. It's horrific. You kick in a door, and suddenly there's a room full of kids, okay? And they're deers in a headlight. They're scared to death. You're in tactical gear, so they're not sure what to make of you. Are you the good guy? Are you the bad guy? Are you here to abuse them and to hurt them again? After about a minute, maybe less, suddenly one of them gets a little bit of braveness and says, "You know what? I'm going to trust." They get up and run over, and they lock those little arms around your leg, and you ain't breaking that lock, brother. I'm sorry. It's just like it's growing on you now. And then the rest of them do the same. Now, what does that do to our first responders, our law enforcement? I'm sorry. We're tough old guys, not supposed to have any emotion, but that doesn't work.
Right up until that point.
It just doesn't work. And so now let me tell you what happens. As we begin to move them and move them into directions, here's what we know in the back of our mind. I'm just going to give you an illustration. Tennessee. This is just what I'm not picking on Tennessee. I love Tennessee. Okay. Got a lot of friends there. Tennessee, we just discovered 7,000 cases out of Child Protective Services. This is a government state agency, okay, of abuse of these children that have been put in their custody. Same kind of abuse they're experiencing with
I
child
believe
sex
that's
trafficking.
happening in every state, Utah included.
Every state. There's no question. There's no question about that. So what we know that we're not stupid. Talk about law enforcement cops. We're not stupid about the tactical, the SWAT teams that are in there. So what do we think in the back of our mind? I risked my life, okay, because these sex traffickers are bad dudes, okay. They're not wimps, and so we had a firefight getting into this situation. I did all that to save these little kids who now entrusted themselves with me. Remember, I can't break their grip on my leg, okay? They're pouring their heart out to us. And I can't know for sure in the back of my mind that we're doing the right thing, that we're delivering them from bondage and from torture and going to give them a better life. You know what that does to the psyche of the cop from that point on?
Okay, so
I'm destroying them.
Okay, so you take them out. You're not certain that the person you give them to next is not going to be part of the abusive cycle, and this is
Correct.
the reason. So I've got several people that are one step away from Tim Ballard. Tim Ballard has been accused of doing some, he hasn't been accused of abusing children, but supposedly using women.
He's had some bad tactics, supposedly.
And that's starting to fall up. None of those court cases right now are holding up.
Correct.
And we've got some court cases here in Utah where a judge basically let go home a fire chief who was doing these things. Come to find out, these two were lovers and connected. Lovers,
correct,
and also trading stuff back and forth.
correct.
So the question, what Michael is saying, I bust down the door, get this kid to lock around me. I tell him everything's going to be fine. This is something that I've said. This is something that I've said to the people right around Tim Ballard. I'm concerned about everybody that's around you guys, because if I was an abuser of children, where would I go to? I'd go to a place like yours, because they've.
Correct.
So the question is, and you just mentioned 7,000 children that are being abused within DCFS?
In Tennessee,
sorry.
Child Protective Services.
And Child Protective
that we've discovered.
Services, these children, 7,000 of them are continuing to be abused.
That's just for last year, okay?
And what you're telling me is you don't know if when you do the handoff, am I sending them actually to another abuser? Because I just told them they're going to be okay.
Correct. And what does it do to our psyche? And you remember now, we've got the lowest morale, we have the highest suicide rate. So did I just potentially kill a bunch of my cop guys from a suicide standpoint because they're struggling with the decision that was made? That was the right decision, but we can't guarantee it. So that's why we had decided we're going to step into the next movement. We're working with the administration now. We need to have a child placement service where we take these kids, we give them help in transition. No, we can't raise hundreds of thousands of kids, but we can put them in a transitional period as we bring them in, get them the therapy, get them the love, get them the support they need, and then make sure that the agencies that we're going to put them in, and I don't like state agencies, so I just don't like the government, okay? But to make sure that the homes they're going to go into have been vetted and make sure they have the best chance of recovery from a lifestyle they didn't deserve, John. They didn't deserve to be treated that way. There's no way possible. We have an opportunity. I've mentioned this before on the air. Invest has also evolved with, we have a partnership with Treasure Trove, an entertainment park in Cave City, Kentucky. It has sanctuary for animals, all kind of little goats, little mini cows, etc. That's great therapy for these kind of kids. It has children entertainment, bouncy houses, little rides, etc. I can't think of a better place to bring these kids for a transitional period, to bring in the best therapists, the best of what we got in the world to help these kids get stabilized as we're moving them into your proper locations. You do that, and I can look at my fellows in the eye and say, yes, your willingness to put your life on the line to defend and to rescue these kids was worth it. You saved a life. And quite frankly, I want to make sure we can do that.
Lord, may the Lord be with you, my friend, in that.
It's going to be called Broken Arrow Children's Ranch. And we've already got everything in place. The location's identified. We're drafting up the plans, the architectural stuff now. We've got to move quickly. And here's why. Just in the last few weeks, we've done more raids. We picked up another 115, 120 kids we rescued. They're coming in by the droves. In fact, let me tell you this. We've just had a whistleblower, I know we need to get off the air, that has now said there are over 7,000 cases within the Biden administration to where we knew these children were being sexually exploited and they refused to investigate. 7,000, not cases per child. That's 7,000 cases. That represents hundreds of thousands of kids that we know. We're determined to go back in and make it right. America, we owe that to these kids. I don't care whether they're American kids or not. Child doesn't deserve to go through that. And quite frankly, America, we owe that to these kids to make sure that we fix a stain that's been on this country and give them hope for the future.
If we work to fix that, we can hopefully gain the grace of Jesus Christ and keeping this
Amen.
nation together. This
Amen.
nation will come apart if we don't do those type of things. Because
So now
Jesus
you understand
Christ
why we're doing
turned
it.
his back on us.
You're
That's
exactly
why.
right. So now you understand why Invest is involved. You understand about the need for the mental health of our officers. You understand about the need to do something to make sure these kids are being rescued truly. And quite frankly, as we unveil, we'll go down this path together, you and I, John, and the American people. Let's do the right thing. God bless you, John. God bless your show. We love you. God bless America. A lot to do in the future. But I thank God that you're willing to make sure the truth is put out to the American people.
Well, thank you, Michael Letts. Thank you for being part of Invest USA. Thank you for coming on the show. Let's go ahead and end it. If you'll hold on for just a moment, I'm going to say
Sure.
thank you to the off air. But folks, this ended heavy. But Jesus Christ wants us to save these children.